shocks and the Indian road conditions. So there are multiple mechanical and thermal design aspects which we taken care of. After taking care of that, we developed our product. We have modified our battery manufacturing line for EV, and we have made our first commercial supply of two-wheeler batteries to an OEM in September 2019. And then by January 2020, we have completed installation of more than 55,000 households with our solar home lighting systems. And also we launched our three-wheeler battery in January 2020. So this is to just give you a small brief about what Signally is. And from here, let us just start up to the main agenda of the day. Okay. So smart solution, less solution. As you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, what we are doing, we are filling up our environment with all sort of smoke, toxic gases, and whatnot. And now there barely any head available for us to breathe properly because all of the environment we have already polluted. Now it's a high time for all of us to think and decide on that what do we want to do. We really want to go the way we are going, or we want to leave a better country, a better world for our generations to come. And in line of that, there are many talks happening in the country worldwide that people should start using more of public transport. People should be doing more of vehicle pooling. So less vehicles are coming on the roads, and we are having less pollution. Even states like Delhi has announced that odd even formula also. That worked up to a certain extent because once you are removing vehicles out of the road and asking people to move into what do you call this public transport and doing the vehicle pooling. But now this COVID thing coming up, do we really be able to follow these things now? Because if we think that this COVID is going to go away in some time and life will be back, so then we are wrong. It is not going back. Now life has changed forever. It will be a different world now where we will be living. We know this SARS and H1N1, these all viruses came a decade back and still they are with us. They have not vanished. Similarly, all the experts and all the statistics would suggest COVID is also not going to vanish. It is going to stay here. Then the only way to live with it to follow some sort of a precaution. And out of that precautions, the social distancing is the main. And now if we have to maintain the social distancing, can we really use the public transport? Or can we really do the, you can say, vehicle pooling? Answer is no, because we have to maintain some distance. Then what is the option left out? Then the option left out is personalized vehicle. And in the personalized vehicle, then EV becomes the obvious choice because if we have so many personalized vehicles coming on the road, then we can understand what is the kind of a pollution we will be giving to the environment, what is the kind of a toxic gases we will be filling in all across. So just to take it further from here, let's try to see how it makes more relevance in today's time. Now, if you see on the right bottom corner of your screen, this is the table, this is the fairly latest data. This is the percentage of vehicles on Indian roads. So if we see out of this, the biggest number is two-wheelers. Out of total vehicles on Indian roads, we have almost 79% of two-wheelers. Then on the second number is the economy car. Economy cars where we talk about all the hatchbacks, all the cars which are sub 1000 cc engine. So that all comes to the economy section. If we put these two together, so it becomes 91% of the Indian automotive load on the Indian roads. But the car battery is fairly a complex affair to do, and also you need a substantially big amount to invest to set it up a car battery plant. So for that purpose, for this moment, we just keep this car battery aside. Then if we go to the number three, the number three is three wheelers.
Ticket kind. Quick, quick,
Somebody is typing that is not able to hear, but I think now if we combine the topmost, the two wheeler and the vehicle at number three, that is three wheeler. So these two put together becomes 83% of the load. And if we go by the 80-20 rule, so for the moment we just concentrate and talk about these two, which are more than 80%. And if we can handle this, so then we are handling the biggest amount of the market. So in our now going forward from here, we will be majorly talking and discussing about two-wheeler and three-wheeler batteries only, and three-wheeler includes e-rickshaws also. And what happens, two-wheeler and three-wheeler batteries are more or less similar in nature. There are some design changes, there are some battery management system changes, but yeah, still more or less the manufacturing and the designing parameters remain almost similar. So let's move next. Now, what happened? This battery cost dominates the cost of EV. With the different EV, if you see, depending upon the capacity of the battery that they are offering and the kind of a vehicle they have, the cost of battery consists of somewhere from 30% to 55% of the total cost of the battery. So then what happens in EV, the cost of battery is a major factor. But now what happens, the large battery will get more cost, and apart from that, what happens if you are using large battery, then it also impacts the energy efficiency. How? Because bigger the battery, more the weight of the battery, more the weight of the vehicle. To carry that much weight, that we need the bigger motor in the vehicle, and then that bigger vehicle will be drawing more current. So your battery will last less. Okay. Now next comes is the smaller battery will create range anxiety. Because what happens, even whatever kind of our daily users pattern is, but still every one of us is very much thrilled with the range. Every one of us want, okay, once I just filled up my tank and I'm ready to go for 100, 200, 300 kilometers. Now, the actual scenario, how much do we really need? Most of the people who are using two-wheeler, they live in an area from where their office is maximum to 15 kilometers away. So daily commute becomes something around 30 kilometers, another 10 kilometers for going somewhere in between to some market or for some procurement or something. So on an average, an individual does not need more than 40 kilometer range per day. But still, we want it because we have, by human nature, we feel insecurity. We don't have much of the range. We feel that our vehicle may stop anywhere and we might have some problem. So then what do we do? As I said, we are generally thrilled with longer range. But the problem is if we go with the longer range, then we have to have a big battery, which will cost more, which will be bulky, which will reduce the energy efficiency. So then what's the answer? So then we clearly need affordable vehicles, batteries, which are small but which last long. How that is possible? So from here, the relevance of lithium-ion battery starts up, and let me try to explain in the next slide that how lithium-ion battery is more suitable for electric. Factors for lithium-ion success. Now, the first factor comes is initially that we all know the cost of lithium-ion batteries were too high, and it was sort of unaffordable for a two-wheeler or three-wheeler. But now, in last 10 years, cost of lithium-ion battery has came down substantially. We'll be talking more about in the coming slides and how and why this cost has came down. But as a matter of fact, in today's scenario, the cost of lithium-ion battery and lead-acid battery are comparable. And in fact, if you compare the life of the lithium-ion battery, then even the cost of the lithium-ion, the ownership cost of lithium-ion battery is even lesser than the lead-acid battery. Now, the another thing comes is the high energy density. We all know a lead acid battery has an energy density of something around 40 watt per kg. Whereas if you talk about the lithium-ion battery, that has a range of 80 to 250 watt per kg, depending upon what chemistry you are using, and which is further expected to go up to 300 watt per kg by the end of 2020. So it means you can pack more energy in a very small piece of a battery. So that is how with lithium-ion battery you can achieve longer range with smaller battery pack, which is compact and light in weight. Another thing comes is with the lead acid battery. The normal standard lead acid battery, the DOD, depth of discharge that we use, is 50%. In some of the cases, typically people go up to even 60%, but not beyond. When we talk about lithium-ion battery, so lithium-ion battery, you can do the discharging up to 100%. The range is 80 to 100%, and normally people operate between 80 to 90%, 10% margin for safety. Everybody keeps, but still, if we go from 50 to 80, still you are getting 30% more energy with the same. Increased number of life cycle. Yes. Lead acid battery has a life cycle from 600 to 800 cycle, whereas lithium-ion battery has a life of 1500 to 2500 cycles, depending upon what chemistry you are using. And moreover, it also impacts the life because in case of lead acid battery, you have to fill up a top of water periodically, check whether your cells are not getting dry, they are properly, you need to maintain gravity and sulfuric acid level and whatnot. But in case of lithium-ion battery, you need not require to do anything. Once you get a cell, then there is no top of it. So I don't nothing required. So even if you don't care much about the battery, still you are going to get the life. Somebody has, yeah. Okay. So let's go to the next point. That is the possibility for a variety of pack capacity. What happens with the lead acid battery, you design your battery plate size, then you do all the pasting, and all machinery and the pasting molds, those are all size space. So once you design your battery for one particular size, then tomorrow you have a different requirement from the market. So then you have to make lots of changes to make that capacity battery pack. But whereas with the lithium-ion battery, here we are using small cells to make a battery pack, and then just by changing the configuration, by changing the number of cells and their organization method, we can make a different capacity battery pack with the same kind of cells with lesser changes. Now, if we see the lithium-ion battery market globally, is nuclear considered or not? If you can see from this graph, in 2014, the EV battery market was 8,500 billion, which has already doubled by 2020. And this market has more than 70-75% share of the lithium ion. Now, in 2020, it has already doubled, and further it is going to more than double by 2025. So, roughly by 2025, we are talking about more than 20,000 billion USD market globally for lithium-ion batteries alone, and that too specific to just EV market. So, with this kind of a big market, it definitely makes sense to go for it. Now, as we're talking about the pricing, so just to give you an idea, in 2010, just 10 years back, the prices of 1 kilowatt hour battery pack was of the tune of something around 1200 USD. And now we are at 135 USD. So price has came down more than 87%. Close to 90% prices coming down. And as I mentioned now, more things are going on, and we are expecting that by the end of 2020, we would be able to pack 300 watt hour energy into a cell. So then this price will go further down. Another factor, if the demand further increase, we start making more battery packs in India, then economy of scale will work out, and then that will also reduce the price substantially. So in coming time, even though if you see all the even though if you see all the metal prices are going up, they are not gone down, be it lithium or molybdenum or cadmium or anything. But still, the prices of batteries are going down. These are the two major reasons for that. One, that more energies will be getting stocked and charged in a cell, and another thing is the economy of scale. So these two factors are working, and still there is scope for these to happen. So in coming time, this prices will further go down, and then it will become absolutely competitive with the lithium ion or any other kind of a battery in the market. So friends, I would take a pause here, and I would request you, if you have any questions till this point, so you can just send them on a chat, and we will take them at the appropriate time. And from here on, we'll just I would request my colleague Mr. Shashi to take you through this technology piece of it, to make you more understand that what are the different parameters and the aspects which you consider and take care while designing a battery pack and while selecting the different component for a lithium-ion battery pack. So over to you, Shashi. Thanks, Vipul. Hello, everyone. I hope I am audible to every one of you. Yes, Shashi, you are So, yes. So, my name is Shashidhar, and today I think I want to take you to a walkthrough of the technical nitty-gritties of what a lithium-ion battery pack is. So, having seen what Vipul has shown, yes, this is a pertinent technology coming up in the market, the one which is going to have a future. So, it becomes imperative that everybody needs to understand this particular technology in a more efficient way. So, what is lithium-ion cell? Basically, it's one of the chemistries that are successful, and there are multiple chemistries in this lithium-ion battery that have come in the past that are being used now. There are few chemistries that are in the recent stage at this point of time, which would cause probably come up in the future. But predominantly, all the lithium-ion batteries share similar design. They all have a metal oxide positive electrode, and they have a negative electrode made of carbon or a graphite, and you have a separator and an electrolyte in that particular. Just like any other cell manufacturing, lithium-ion cells also have these aspects. Yeah, next slide. Okay. So there are many chemistries of this particular lithium-ion battery. If we see some old chemistries, there was something called LCO, which is lithium cobalt oxide, LMO, which is called lithium manganese oxide. The current two technologies, the current two chemistries that we are mostly using are the LFP and NMC. Basically, they stand for lithium pyrophosphate and nickel manganese cobalt. And there is another chemistry also which probably would come in the future, which is the LTO, because that's a lithium titanate oxide. So today we are going to see more specifically these two chemistries, the LFP and the NMC chemistries, which are more pertinent for the EV industry. So coming to the lithium pyrophosphate, if you look at the nominal voltage per cell, the nominal voltage of an LFP cell is about 3.2 volts, whereas the nominal voltage for an NMC cell is about 3.7. What does this translate into? Basically, if I want to make a bigger battery pack, I end up having more number of cells for the LFP compared to the number of cells that I use in an NMC-based battery pack. The second aspect is about the specific energy, or we can even call it energy density. So, what is energy density? Basically, the amount of energy that is stored in a given system per unit. So, if we see the energy density of a LFP, typically ranges from about 90 to 150 watt hour per kg, whereas in the case of NMC, about 150 to about 250 watt hour per kg. More and more research is happening, and many new chemistries are being added into this NMC chemistry in order to improve its performance and reliability. So the charge rate, every battery is defined by its charge and discharge rate. Basically, how much is the rate at which you can charge a particular battery, and how much is the rate at which you can discharge your battery. So in that aspect, when we see that the LFP has a charge rate of up to 0.5 C, is about 0.5 times capacity of that particular battery. So about a 20 Ah battery, you can charge with a rate of about 10 ampere. Whereas on the other side, NMC can support up to 1 C charging rate. And on the discharge rate also, you can see that the LFP has a constraint. It can be discharged with a 1 C rating. Whereas with an NMC, you can even go above 1 C rating. You can go up to 2 C rating for a discharge of an NMC-based lithium-ion cell. Into the cycle life, again, cycle life is something which is a bigger factor for the lithium-ion industry to get into the market and the existing technologies. So about 2,000 cycles is the cycle life for the LFP, and whereas for the NMC, even more than 2,000 cycles, it's about 2,500 cycles. And when we talk about the cycle life, what is cycle life for a lithium-ion cell? So lithium-ion cycle life is something so you consider the particular life is over when the capacity of the particular cell reaches about 70% of its rated capacity. So it is not that the cell will be completely dead by the time life cycle is over. We normally consider a cell when it is degraded to about 70% of its original capacity. It is considered as a full cycle, and we do not use that particular cell for that particular application. So thermal runaway, again, thermal runaway is also another situation where an increase in the temperature it changes the condition in a way that causes further increase of the temperature, and it often leads to burning or destruction of that particular material. So thermal runaway for LFP is about 270 degrees centigrade. This is one of the best chemistry in the lithium-ion series that has a good thermal stability. Nickel, manganese, cobalt also with the specific additives into that particular thing, they also can get up to 250 degrees centigrade, so which is very close. And as you can see, the application area typically for the LFP would be stationary application. That means, say for example, if you want to use it for your domestic applications at home, offices, for different purposes, you do not have a space and you do not have very rapidly changing current situation. And yes, lithium ferrophosphate was also one of the biggest technology that happened in the past few years. Many initiatives related with lithium ferrophosphate, and LNC is the chemistry that's going forward now with a promising future. Basically, with all those points like very high energy density, charging with higher rate, giving more cycle life, and giving almost the same thermal stability of LFP cell. So if we compare these two things, typically the LFP cell has a very flat voltage curve. Basically, if you fully charge the battery to be about 3.65 volts for a LFP, and pretty much your 90% of the energy is getting stored at about 3.1 to 3.3 volts of that particular cell. And the internal resistance of this particular LFP cell is also much higher compared to other LFPs. So higher internal resistance would mean it can for self discharge is faster, and then over a period of time, when the battery is getting charged and discharged, you may face some cell balancing or cell imbalancing issues. Whereas on the other hand, the LNC does not have these issues. Basically, they have been addressing all these pain areas where the LNC had issues, and basically the market is looking towards this particular chemistry for adaptation in next slide. So yeah. So if we summarize the chemistry, typically this is a graphical representation. As people were telling, you can see the lead acid has energy density of about 40 watt-hour per kg, whereas NMC goes about 200 watt-hour per kg. And when you see the other aspects like cycle life, cost, and energy density and other things, the energy density is the one which we have seen. The cost is also something NMC is comparable or equal to what LFP is offering today. And cycle life is also something that NMC modified NMC chemistries would give a better life cycle than LFP pack. So the pertinent question after looking at the chemistries and trying to understand between LFP and NMC is which chemistry is better. So before we judge anything on that particular thing, I think most of the things, whether it's the battery or any other product, what is that to be actually look in the product? It's about the size or physical attributes of that particular thing, weight, size, and other things. It's about the cost, and it's about the reliability. Basically, is that particular product reliable? Is that going to live long? And is that going to go trouble? So in that aspect, when you see that energy density, yes, definitely LFP has a very high energy density compared to LFP. So you can reduce on your battery pack sizing. Typically, you have a battery pack which is about 60% the size of an LFP battery for the same capacity. So the next aspect in that particular thing is internal resistance. So internal resistance is the parameter inside a cell which is responsible for the battery to self-discharge. So lower the internal resistance, the better is the life of the particular battery. So in a NMC chemistry, the internal resistance is much lesser than the LFP, and there we have an advantage on NMC cell. Coming to the thermal stability, yes, in particular for our Indian market and other things, LFP has thermal stability, but again, it's a trade-off between what is that we are looking at. We need to have a more smaller, more a battery that higher life cycle and with a lesser cost of ownership versus only thermal stability. So, even when we look at the previous slide, the thermal runaway parameter is also not too far. The LFP has a thermal runaway at about 270 degrees centigrade, and the NMC has it about 260 degrees. And typically, all the batteries, even when they are operating, we definitely do not go up close and to operate. We normally operate at about 60 degrees centigrade. That's the maximum that we can think about in our field. And coming to the cell voltages, the NMC cell has a nominal voltage of 3.7 as compared to a 3.2 volt for an LFP. This would, translate into less number of cells in the smaller of the battery pack when we do a battery pack using NMC cells versus the battery pack which uses the LFP. So, in the recent past, the NMC chemistries have become very preferred technology for most of the OEMs who are manufacturing battery packs, the automotive industry. Next. Shashi, actually, I see lots of questions coming up from the people regarding two things. One, about the life cycle. Because I've seen many people have written that their understanding the life cycle of LFP is better than that is one they are asking. Second, one person has asked a question about that as per his understanding, NMC is not safe, it catches fire and all that. So should we really go for NMC cells? And then one more person was asking question about that for EV batteries, what is the preferable chemistry that one should go? So I think this is your present slide which is there on the screen. So it is very much clear that NMC is the preferred chemistry for EV. And to answer more of this, that worldwide every country has moved on to NMC specifically for the purpose of EVs because and in fact China itself has stopped using the LFP chemistry within China, and that is how the what is happening. Lots of dumping of LFP cells is happening in India, and because of that also many of the people just want to liquidate their own stock, and they are coming up a very cheaper price and mentioning many kind of things about NMC. But having said that, the world is moving toward the NMC. And as far as the question of safety is concerned, just to answer, as partially Shashi has already answered that, the thermal runaway is quite high, and with the BMS, nobody operates that temperature and control and cut off the things before attaining that temperature. Moreover, if we see from the safety point of view, I think you all must be aware of the fact where we are talking about this 200 or 250 watt per kg energy density in case of NMC, whereas petrol has the energy density of 9,000 watt per kg. So in that way, that is more hazardous and more 9,500 watt hour per liter. Even for kg, I think it's even higher, about 1,800 watt hour per kg. Fossil fuel comes in the liter. So the it's all about how good you design your battery pack in terms of BMS, in terms of control of temperatures and thermal management. And I'm sure when we'll progress through this session on technology, and so she will be taking care of all the points. So better you just first go through the session, and maybe then at the end of his session, if still some technical points are left over, you can please send them across. So I think that would answer most of the questions. questions asked so far. Now I'm moving ahead, and rest of the questions will take up at time. Thanks. Yeah. So to answer that particular question, I think Mithu has already mentioned. Moreover, there is one more factor also. If you actually go into the internet and search for all the largest producers of phosphate, you can see that China would be first ranker in the country. China has a lot of reserves of phosphate, and obviously that would be the country which probably promote the LFP more. But having the technical aspect very clear, it's all about what is the application where you want to use these LFPs or lithium ion cells. Your application is a stationary application, weight is not a constraint, height is not a constraint. You do not have a higher charge and discharge rate, you can obviously go for LFP chemistry as well. But what we are thinking more about is which chemistry would be more suitable in the EV context. So that's where the NMC chemistry based out very clearly advantage. So that's all about the chemistry part of it. And now let's move to the form factors. Different form factors that are available on the lithium-ion battery. So pouch cells are available. Pouch cells are there, but not many people use the pouch cells because of the fragile nature. Basically, you need to have a lot of casing and other things for that particular thing, protect each cell from getting punctured, bulged, and all those things. So yeah, so it is there. I think the pouch is one of the variants which is available. Second form factor which we talked about is cylindrical. Again, you have different sizes of cylinders that are available. And the third happens to be the prismatic. So if we look at the energy density, when you do a battery pack using these cells, the highest energy density would go for a pouch. So pouch cell definitely yes, because there is no strong casing for each cell, and then when you combine all these cells together in parallel combination that we do for any battery pack manufacturing, you end up having lower. So you end up packing higher watt hour per kg of the pouch battery pack made of pouch. Coming to the cylindrical, the energy density would be low because naturally when we have 4-5 cylinders kept side by side, you have an air gap in between. And when you actually build up a battery pack, not many cells connected in series and parallel. You have a larger air constrained space inside that particular battery pack. And on the prismatic cells, you have very flat corners and flat faces and sharp corners in that particular thing where your design for the battery pack becomes much easier in terms of having them closely connected, having some sort of a heat dissipation like a aluminum heat connecting to the body of the battery pack. Thermal management, some people may think that cylindrical cells definitely have sort of the air gap in between the cylindrical cells would have a better thermal efficiency or better way of managing thermal build-up inside. But the challenge with the EV segment where we talked about the battery pack should be IP65 or IP67 graded battery pack. So there is no scope for the air to escape. There is no ventilation for that particular thing. Pressure comes in and then takes away this hot air outside. That sort of a possibility is not there in the battery pack. And the air becomes a deterrent basically for your heat. Air being a poor conductor of heat. Whereas on the prismatic cells, you can actually design your battery pack in such a way that the outer body of these cells get connected to a aluminum plate or something which can dissipate the heat to that particular thing. Then the external surface can so that is all. a lot of stability to the house. But on the cylindrical and pneumatic, you can definitely have better mechanical stability. Again, on the cylindrical cell, because of the air gaps in between, you will have features about how we do that, and then when there are connections made on the cell, they are called welding. When they weld the cells in parallel, care has to be taken in terms of not putting undue pressure on the welding part. So on this context, I would even mention, for a cylindrical cell, typically cylindrical cells by nature they are not available for a higher capacity. So at the maximum can be about 10 AH cell. That would be the maximum cell that will be available. And if I were to make a 100 AH battery pack, I will have to use 10 of the cells make 100 AH. And for a higher voltage, that would translate into much more than a number of cells. Compared to that particular thing, again, prismatic has an edge where you can get prismatic cells at a much higher capacity. So you get prismatic cells even at 80 AH, 100 AH. So you use a less number of cells in a particular battery pack. So lesser the number of cells, lesser is the greater is the reliability, or lesser is the scope for any failure of the battery pack or so one advantage that comes in the cylindrical cells is about the design flexibility. So since the cells are small, when you build up a bigger battery pack, and if you have very specific size constraints or very specific a form factor, it's in some sort of a trapezoidal format or some sort of a Z-shaped format or something. Designing a pouch or a prismatic cell would be slightly different. Whereas designing a cylindrical cell would be easier because you have your basic building block very small block. So what are the different factors that decide on the type of battery pack? Now that we know form factor. So when choosing a battery pack, it's not just about the chemistry that we need to get, not just about the form factor. Another thing we need to really see what is the application where we want the battery pack. The application is for a stationary, your requirement. Your application is for a mobility application like an electric vehicle or something. And again, on the charge and discharge rates that are demanded by the application. So what are the different charge and discharge rates that the application demands? So if you want a higher charge and discharge rate, you need to consider for allow a higher charge and discharge. Not require a higher charge and discharge. You can go with the high. And the next thing about the weight consideration. So how much does should the battery weigh? For an electric vehicle, when we increase the weight of the battery pack, we the sense of increasing the weight of the vehicle. But today, even in the internal combustion engine market, when we look at it, the people compete on this particular weight of the vehicle. Somebody who has a 10 kg weight less than the competitor will have about a 5 kilometer range more than the competitor weight. So obviously, these are something that EV segment, weight is also another consideration that we take care of. And the next thing is about the life expectancy. So it all depends on how many cycles you want to have the battery pack. 1,000 cycles would translate close to about 7 years. You're charging it daily month. So are you expecting that sort of a life expectancy or a shorter life expectancy? Lesser. So all these factors basically depend. They define your type of battery pack. So these are different areas of this particular lithium-ion battery pack. So the segment stationary application. On the stationary application, you can look at it. They cater for domestic requirements. They can cater for commercial establishments like offices, malls, and others. They cater for even industrial requirements and the utility grade requirements. So on the right hand side, if you see the mobility segment, you have different things like two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers on the cars and the light vehicles, and even on the buses, trucks, and other heavy vehicles. And what Sydney focuses more on this particular lithium-ion battery, what we are focusing currently is on domestic segment on the stationary area, stationary space, where we have already deployed about 50,000 of these home lighting systems and battery packs. Then on the mobility system, we are focusing on two-wheelers and three. So I would slightly delve on this basic, concept of how to design a battery pack. So cells are the basic building block for a battery pack, and you need to connect these cells different combinations, series and parallel combinations in order to achieve your required AH rate. So connecting series cells in series, they would typically increase your voltage, but it would not increase your current. The AH rating would not increase if you connect the cells in series. And on the contrary, if you connect the cells in parallel, your AH rating would increase, but this will not increase your voltage rating. The cell will be still at a voltage of about 3.7. What we need to do is a combination of series and the parallel combination to make a battery pack. So when we require a battery pack, voltage and AH are the two parameters that we need to consider. The first thing that we need to do is that for parallel, connect parallelly these cells in a way that you achieve your required AH capacity. Then you combine, you make multiple of the blocks and then connect all of them. You get on to the particular voltage. So just to see an example like how it works out. So if you take an example of a 48 volt, 48 battery pack, if I need to fit this battery pack to get an AH energy cell. So what I will do is I will take 4 of those cells and connect them in parallel. It would make a 40 AH block, but the voltage is still 3.7 volts. Then I take 13 such blocks and connect all of them in series. So that gives me a voltage of 48.1. This parallel and the series combination would give me 48 volt and a 40 AH battery pack. So the combination of this parallel and the series is done through basically bus bars, like one example that we show on the screen. So these are the nickel bus bars that typically are used to connect. Right. So batteries. So when we talk about a complete battery, it's not just one cell that defines the battery, not just one bus bar that defines the battery, not only one BMS or something that defines the battery. This BMS happens to be the most critical part, but there are multiple parts. Like choosing the right cell, we need to choose the right cell in terms of chemistry, size, form factor, capacity. We need to build a say 200 AH battery pack. I cannot go with a 60 AH cell and then start building up a battery pack. We need to be cognizant about choosing the right capacity. And the other is the the next part is again same charge and discharge control. So lithium-ion batteries, one of the major things is that the charging of these lithium-ion batteries needs to be done at lower temperature. Light. So if you charge the battery at a very high temperature, the light is going to get it. So the next thing is thermal management. So you need to provide a lot of your heat dissipating elements like heat sinks, like you need to provide sort of a bus bar sizing is also quite important because bus bar is the one that is going to carry all your current. when you have higher current passing through the bus bars need to have higher area of cross so that they can dissipate the heat. And even think about the operation conditions. When you are putting a battery pack in one particular application, you need to see that the ambient conditions are good and they do not really sort of heat in the and around the region. And the next is about the bus bar, mechanical design. So mechanical design also, in the mechanical design we need to consider about the bus bar, because in terms of holding this particular cell together, bus bar plays a crucial role, and you cannot have any weak connectivity on this particular bus bar. And especially when we talk about EV applications, it's much more pertinent on that particular thing. And the next thing is about cell holder or clamping. How do you hold these cells? How do you clamp them so that you do not provide any movement in the X, Y, or Z direction when the vehicle is moving? So stability during this vibration and shock and other things are to be considered. And the fourth point basically is about EMS protection. Basically, does your battery pack have an IP65 protection or an IP67 or even much higher than but coming on to this particular management of the battery pack, yes, your battery pack should have a mechanism where the battery pack or the BMS would read the SOC, the state of charge of that particular battery. It needs to have cell balancing, because you now connect multiple of these cells in series. Each cell may not discharge the same way, same rate, and during all the time it may not happen. After a few months of operation, some cell may start deteriorating slowly. So there has to be a mechanism where particular balancing needs to happen continuously, and that is also one of the key factors that a battery pack should have. Yeah, and on the protection, you have a lot of parameters. You typically need to protect the battery pack from over current, over or under voltage, or over temperature or under temperature. There is a short circuit on the load side. If your motor is drawing certain bursts of current, then if there are any reverse polarity connections in terms of load or charger, and then when the battery pack is deep discharge, the battery pack is not used for many months and gets to a very low voltage, then we cannot charge the battery pack in normal we need to charge it a very low current until the battery reaches its base voltage. So that is something called a pre-charge. So these are some of the features that the battery pack needs to have. Essentially, these battery packs have. So specifically on this particular thermal management, our temperatures are close to about 45 degrees area. Thermal management is something that needs to be taken care, and design should consider a lot of things. There are multiple mechanisms of cooling a battery pack. There are active ways and there are active ways. Active ways are something which are very costly. Basically, if you are looking for a two-wheeler battery pack, implementing any active cooling mechanism really may not be viable proposition. But there are some passive mechanisms that are commercially viable, like phase changing material, or which we can integrate with our battery pack, and we can get control on it. So a simple example of this particular impact on heat. So the heat impact both on capacity and on cycle life. So on the capacity, it's on a daily basis. Say, for example, if you take some capacity battery and you discharge it at a say some particular rate, 0.5 rate, this particular thing, you look at that particular thing at a room temperature, you get about 101%. Cells would typically size slightly more than they rated. Just like our weight in the market, when we go and purchase some items in the market, you call it 1 kg, it may be slightly more than maybe 5 grams more or 10 grams more. So you get typically higher capacity per cell. But at the same cell, when you are discharging at a 0.5, you get at a very high temperature or a very low temperature. Both are not good. So in both the cases, you can see that the capacity is only about 95% and 92%. So you end up getting lesser mileage. In case of EV market, EV segment, you are looking at it, you end up getting a lower mileage. And if you continue to do this particular thing on a daily basis, even impact on your life. So the bottom you can see two graphs. So the one is basically at a room temperature when you are charging and discharging at a 1C rating. You typically get about 2000 or even 2500 cycles by the time your capacity reaches from 100% to about 70%. But on the same side, if we are looking at on the right side, the cell that is discharged at a 1C rating, but at a temperature of 55 degrees centigrade. So there you can see it is 70% capacity much faster at about 300 cycles. So PMS, as I told you, is a very critical part. It's the brain of any battery pack. So on the BMS part, we have multiple variants. If you look into the market, people offerings are different. If somebody would offer a hardware BMS, there would be something called a smart BMS, and much more. You can do much more than a smart BMS, something like a super smart BMS. So what are the limitations of these things? Like when you consider a battery pack with a hardware BMS, all the parameters are rigid. That means all the parameters are rigid. That means you cannot change any particular parameter based on your application needs. That means today my application has about 60 ampere overload cutoff at about 60 amperes. And then if tomorrow if the same application requires more than 50 amperes current, I cannot change it in a hardware. Whereas in a smart BMS, you will have this particular provision where you can change this parameter for different things. So let us see about some of the features that need to be there for a BMS. So cell balancing is something that we need to have. So this is something that both hardware and smart BMS both will have this particular thing. And then on the digital and analog output controls, so if there is a need to control a motor, control some sort of actuator or something, that is something that we can do it through smart BMS and may not be possible through hardware BMS. And then thermal protection, again on the thermal protection, yes, it's possible through any BMS, but the only challenge is if you want to alter or change these parameters on the go, you cannot do it with the hardware. They are hardware designed on the hardware, and you cannot change those parameters on the go. And then the current and voltage protection. Again, every BMS would give this current and voltage protection. As I told you, the load current and if you want to change these parameters, you cannot do it on a hardware BMS, but on a smart BMS, you do that. And health monitoring, like computation of SOC, state of charge, and state of health of a battery, and other things. These are that are computational things, computational parameters. And once these things are required, then you need some processor to sit on that particular thing and do that particular computation and calculate and measure those things. And the BMS should be in a position to handle, work for many of the chemistries. Like it should be compatible with LFP or NMC or any other chemistry that comes tomorrow with a slight alteration. So you need to have a design that can take up a wider range of the input. And on the communication part, needs to have different communication methods. So CAN is something that most of the BMSs use, and it is mostly used for talking to vehicle control units, talking to a charging station, and talking to some other peripherals within the electric vehicle. Bluetooth and the GPRS are some of the things that can help in terms of remote monitoring, or where you want to monitor these things on a remote platform and then manage those things. So the next thing is on this particular battery pack. When I have an access to a battery pack, what would I do? Basically, I use it normally for my application, but when there is a need, I tended to use this particular battery for a different purpose also. And I know that this particular battery rating is thin. So something like adapters that we use use in our home. So there is an adapter given for say one particular electronic appliance. When we see the rating and say, yeah, this is also a 12 volt adapter, that is also a 12 volt adapter, and in matches, we end up using that particular adapter for a different appliance also. Same is the case with any battery also. So what there is this is the super smart battery that we talked about, which has another feature inside that particular thing where there is a switch between the battery and the external power. So this switch is operated by the BMS internally, and there would be an authentication basically to authenticate a battery to a particular vehicle and authenticate a battery to a particular charging station or a charge. So unless this authentication happens, the battery would not provide any power to the connected load, nor the battery would take any power for charging from an unknown source. So a lot of confusion is also there in the market. Typically, people think that there is a lead acid battery charger. Why not I use the lead acid battery charger for a lithium-ion battery charger? So yeah, you can use. Technically, it is not a immediate harmful thing, but the charging algorithm or the charging mechanism for a lead acid battery is different, and for a lithium-ion battery. So when you use a lead acid charger for a lithium-ion charger, you end up either not charging the battery fully or probably always doing a overcharge. The protection always kicks in and then does not allow you to charge it to full extent. And on a longer run, you still have definitely some impact on the life cycle or the functionality of the battery. So these are the large smart batteries we're talking about, which do not work without the authorization, and with the authorization they work only with the authorized charger and deliver power to an authorized vehicle. So this is how this large smart batteries would work. So this is basically a swapping or a charging. Basically, when you want to take your vehicle and then swap your battery, yeah, you can always do that particular thing. Once there is an energy operator, and then you kind of use it like your gas cylinder at home. So you really do not think about the look and feel of that particular cylinder, but rather it's about the amount of LPG that is inside that particular cylinder. So on the same note, it would be something like swapping is also something which is possible. But for that, it has to be there has to be enough data which gives the user a lot of confidence in terms of, okay, I am giving the pack which has got a health rate of about 99%, and I am getting a pack which also has a health, SOH, basically state of health of about 99%. So these are some things which can be known only if these batteries are monitored from the day they are deployed during the operation. So the vehicle as well as the charging stations, they would be connected to cloud, and the cloud platform would provide this necessary information in terms of even you swap a 99% healthy battery with a 99% healthy battery, you swap a 80% healthy battery with an 80%. So these are some of the graphs that we have captured from our different notes that we have done. So if you see here, I have captured three different graphs here. So basically the cell voltages. So this is a 48 volt battery pack having 13 cell series. And then there is a SOC graph, and then there is a current graph. So this is on a right on a two-wheeler vehicle, basically when the vehicle is running. The current discharge, if you can see, it is not smooth. So basically, whenever a vehicle goes, the current discharge is not constant. There are peaks, there are surges, there are troughs, and your BMS needs to handle all such things. And not only handling it, should be in a position to even record such things, which would help in terms of whenever you have an issue with your battery pack in terms of sudden you suddenly your vehicle stops, or there are some issues. If your BMS or the battery pack has this particular capacity to record all this, it give a lot of insight what is happening on the particular battery pack. Yeah. So moreover, the resolution is also quite important. You need, the BMS or this particular measurement for doing should be very, very accurate and should have a very high resolution. For example, if I am looking at this particular voltage graph, these are the cell voltages basically on the left hand side when you look at it. These are the cell voltages on the same date and the same time I have taken this particular thing. The previous graph, you have seen that the cell voltages are all like a single line. But if you look very close into this particular thing at a resolution of 50 millivolt, so you can see that the voltage is not that straightforward as we have seen. There are a lot of ups and downs. All this depends on the current situation. When your vehicle is running, the current is also not same gets translated onto your voltage. Your voltage is also not a smooth curve or a line. But on the charging cycle, on the right hand side, if you look at the same battery pack, they charge it with a constant current. Yeah, they are smooth. The same resolution of 50 millivolt, you can see that the graph is quite smooth and all the cell voltages are increasing gradually. So it's about the ability of the BMS in order to measure and with accuracy and with a higher resolution can give you a lot of insights about that particular battery pack. So to summarize, what good battery pack need to have? A good battery pack actually should have a good engineered mechanical design. Basically, you need to have all the ingress protection, you need to have the heat dissipation and all that factors. And you need to have a very high feature pattern BM, a lot of features on your BM. And typically some safety certifications, basically this AIS 048, which is a mandatory requirement from ARAI, many of the batteries that are intended to be used need to use. And there are some other regulatory things like UN 38.3.233. These are some of the transport related certifications that we need to take. Yeah, but these are some of the safety certificates that any battery should have. So a battery pack without any safety certification is also risky. Yeah. So to summarize all this discussion, one of the key points which I want to mention is basically building a battery pack and is not just one factor that would decide that particular thing. There are multiple factors as we have seen in the previous slide. And then having all those things, we need to monitor all these trends. Whatever we are providing for Yes, somebody is trying to scribble on the screen. I would request please not to do so. It will be problematic for other people to understand this. It's nothing to make fun out of it. Please, yeah, go ahead, Shashi. So whatever we are providing for our battery pack, if we are able to measure and monitor while it is in discharging mode or whether it's in charging mode, wherever it is being used, wherever it is idle, whenever the battery pack is there, if you are able to monitor it, you can actually improve the life of the battery. Yeah. So I think that ends my session. Carry on. Thank you, Shashi, for giving us insight about the battery technology and the different parameters. And guys, just to make clear one thing, this session is not about the Sydney product, or we are just making it some sales speech to promote our product, giving some price or something what we are doing. We are just trying to just elaborate about what are the different studies, what are the different available from the authenticated sources. We are trying to do that. We are trying to prove something or someone wrong or something good. Okay, it is up to your judgment. We are just trying to tell you all the aspects of the thing. And then having understanding of all these aspects, you need to decide on that what is good for you and what is not for you. And I again request because I see many of the people